I found my wife's affair with her boss, who's been secretly siphoning $250, $0 from our family account, and now she's threatening to take everything, including the house and our savings, if I file for divorce. Hello everyone. Dear listeners, please share your thoughts in the comments section below. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Now let's begin the video. Using a throwaway for obvious reasons with certain specifics modified to preserve anonymity. I never thought I'd find myself in a situation like this, but here I am, typing out what's probably the worst thing that's ever happened to me. It all started with a gut feeling, like that gnawing suspicion that something's just not right, even if everything looks fine on the surface. My name's Mark, and I've been married to Lisa for 8 years. We seemed like a pretty normal couple, at least, that's what I told myself. We had a nice house, good jobs, a couple of kids, and a lot of shared memories. But somewhere along the way, I started noticing little things. Her phone always being tucked away, her spending more and more time at work, and her becoming increasingly bitchy and dismissive at home. At first, I brushed it off. Maybe she was stressed with work, or maybe I was just overthinking it. But then came the signs I couldn't ignore. One night, I came home early from a business trip, expecting to surprise her with dinner. Instead, I found her not just late but completely absent from the house. Her phone was lying on the coffee table, and I noticed a strange message pop up on the screen when I accidentally knocked it off her desk, a text from her boss, Ryan. The message was suggestive, flirty even, and she had responded with a lot more than just professional banter. My stomach sank. I felt like I'd been punched in the gut. I decided to do a little digging. I didn't want to confront her blindly, so I started paying more attention. Her behavior changed drastically. She was secretive, defensive, and always finding ways to cover her tracks. She'd leave her phone in the bathroom, or she'd be working late, but then come back home with a strange glow in her eyes, like she'd just had sex. I even caught her sneaking out early one morning, her face flushed and her eyes darting around like a guilty kid caught with his hand in the cookie jar. That's when I knew something was really wrong. Then, one evening, I decided to check our bank account. I noticed a strange transfer, $250, zero siphoned out over the past 6 months. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Our savings, our future, just disappearing into thin air. I called the bank, but they told me the transfer was authorized through our online account, and I realized Lisa must have been involved. The worst part, I found out she'd been secretly funneling money to Ryan, her boss. I felt like I'd been hit with a freight train. All the trust, all the years of pretending everything was fine gone in an instant. I confronted her the very next day. I was furious, hurt, and confused all at once. I told her I knew about the affair and the money. Her face twisted into this bitchy sneer, and she started lying right away. "You're crazy," she snapped. "Ryan's just a friend, you're overreacting, you're paranoid." But I had proof, screenshots, bank statements, messages. Still, she kept denying everything, insisting I was just jealous or imagining things. It was infuriating. How could she lie so easily? How could she betray me like this? That night I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying everything in my mind, the sneaking around, the money, her lies. I felt like I'd been punched again and again. I was angry mostly. Angry at her for cheating, for stealing from us, and for making me doubt myself. But underneath all that anger there was something else, deep sadness. I trusted her with everything, and now I was faced with the reality that she'd been hiding this secret life from me. I started questioning everything I thought I knew about our marriage, about her. How long had she been doing this? Did she really love me, or was I just a paycheck to her? The betrayal cut deep, and I knew I had a choice to make. I could either keep pretending everything was okay and let her keep her secrets, or I could take control and do something about it. The thought of losing everything, our house, our savings, our future, was terrifying. But even more terrifying was the idea of staying with someone who could betray me so easily. I was at a crossroads, and I knew I couldn't stay silent anymore. I had to figure out my next move. That night after I found out everything, her affair, the money siphoning, the lies, I couldn't sleep. My mind was racing. I kept going over everything I'd uncovered, trying to piece together how long she'd been doing this, how deep her deception ran. I felt like I'd been hit by a train. The betrayal was so raw, so unexpected. Lisa had always played the perfect wife, charming, attentive, the kind of woman everyone admired. But behind that facade was someone I barely recognized anymore. I decided I needed to confront her again, but this time with more proof. I sat her down the next morning, showed her everything I'd found, the bank statements, the messages, the transfer records. Her reaction was a mix of fury and denial. She looked me dead in the eye and said, "You're overreacting. It's none of your business. Ryan's just a friend. I don't know what you're talking about." She brushed off my concerns, tried to gaslight me into thinking I was paranoid. It was infuriating. I could see her face harden, that bitchy smirk creeping in as she spun her lies. I told her I wasn't buying it, that I had enough evidence to take this to the authorities if I wanted. That's when she snapped. "If you do that, I swear I'll take everything you care about. The house, the savings, everything," she hissed. Her voice was cold, calculating. She threatened me like I was some kind of villain for uncovering her secrets. That moment was a turning point. I realized she was willing to go to any lengths to keep her lies hidden, even if it meant destroying what we had. I felt a swirl of emotions, anger, heartbreak, betrayal. But underneath it all was a strange sense of clarity. I knew I couldn't stay silent. I couldn't let her keep destroying us. I had to do something, but I also didn't want to just blow everything up without a plan. I needed to think about my options, about how to protect myself and what was left of our life together. I decided I'd gather more proof, figure out exactly how much she'd stolen, and then decide what to do next. That evening, I started digging deeper into our finances. I wanted to know if there was any other money missing, if she'd been lying about her expenses, or if she'd been planning this for a while. I also reached out to a lawyer just to get some advice. I didn't want to act impulsively, at least not yet. But I was already feeling the weight of her betrayal pressing down on me. I thought about our kids, how they'd be affected by all this. It hurt to think about breaking apart my family, but I also couldn't see a way to stay with someone who lied and cheated and stole from us. In the days that followed, I kept my distance. I didn't want to give her any indication I was onto her, but I kept a close eye on her every move. She was acting more bitchy than ever, snapping at me over small things, trying to gaslight me into believing I was overreacting. Every time she looked at her phone, I wondered if she was talking to Ryan, planning her next move. The tension was unbearable, but I told myself I had to stay calm. I had to be smart. I couldn't let her see how much I was hurting, not yet. Meanwhile, I was also secretly recording some of our conversations, just in case I needed hard proof later. I didn't want to be the guy who lost everything because he didn't have the evidence. I was starting to think strategically, knowing that if she was willing to threaten me with everything, she might do worse if I pushed too hard. I knew I had to be careful, but I also knew I couldn't let her get away with it. Not without consequences. Every day felt like walking on a tightrope. The emotional toll was huge. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and angry. But I also knew I had to stay composed. I started imagining how I'd handle the fallout, how I'd protect myself and my kids if I had to. The thought of losing everything was terrifying, but I also realized I couldn't keep pretending everything was fine. I had to face the truth, no matter how painful it was. And the truth was, my wife had betrayed me in the worst way imaginable, and I was determined to do something about it. After a few days of obsessing over everything, I knew I couldn't just sit around waiting for her next move. I also realized that confronting her again without a solid plan would only make things worse. So I started thinking about my options, how I could turn this around in my favor. First, I needed to get a clear picture of exactly how much she'd stolen, how much money was left, what she might be planning with Ryan, and what leverage I had. I hired a private investigator. It sounds extreme, but I wanted hard facts. Turns out, Lisa had been funneling money to Ryan for at least a year, stupidly, through secret accounts and shell companies. The investigator found her meeting Ryan at a fancy hotel last weekend. They were there for hours, and from what I saw in the photos, they looked pretty cozy. I felt a mix of rage and shame, rage at her betrayal, Shame that I'd been blind for so long. While I was gathering intel, I also started talking to a divorce lawyer. I wanted to know my legal standing, especially since she'd threatened to take everything. The lawyer was surprisingly sympathetic but told me I needed to be prepared for a fight, especially since she had the money and the threat of legal action on her side. She kept insisting she'd fight for the house, the savings, and anything else she could get her hands on. That's when I realized I had to act fast. If I was going to protect what was mine, I couldn't wait any longer. I decided to set up a meeting with Lisa, but this time I wanted it to be serious. I told her I knew everything, that I had proof of her affair, her theft, and her threats. I told her I was done playing nice. If she didn't come clean, I was going to take action. Her reaction was classic. She started crying, saying she loved me, that it was all a mistake, that Ryan was just a business associate who got carried away. She spun her usual lies, but I wasn't buying any of it anymore. I'd heard enough. The next step was to confront Ryan. I knew where he worked, and I found out he was a senior executive at a big firm downtown. I didn't want to go in guns blazing, at least not yet. Instead, I sent him an anonymous email, telling him I knew about his involvement with Lisa and that I had proof of the money he'd siphoned from us. I wanted to scare him, make him realize I was serious. The email worked faster than I expected. Next thing I knew, I got a message back from Ryan trying to deny everything but clearly panicked. That was good enough for me. I wanted him to know I was coming for him. Meanwhile, Lisa kept trying to manipulate me. She begged, she cried, she promised she'd change. But I'd heard enough. I told her I was going to file for divorce, that I'd take her to court, and that she'd regret ever crossing me. Her face twisted into a sneer and she threatened me again, this time saying she'd fight for everything. I just looked at her and said, "Go ahead. I've got the proof. You're not winning this." That was the moment I decided I'd cut her out of my life for good. I also started looking into freezing our joint accounts. I didn't want her draining everything before I had a chance to protect myself. I contacted the bank, explained the situation, and they put a hold on any large transactions. It was a small victory. At least I had some control. I wasn't naive enough to think she wouldn't try something else, but I was prepared. I knew I had to be relentless now. This wasn't just about money. It was about reclaiming my life from someone who'd betrayed me so completely. The emotional toll was massive. I felt humiliated, angry, and deeply hurt. But I also felt a strange sense of clarity. I'd been in denial for too long, and now I saw everything clearly. She'd been lying from the start, using me, stealing from us, and now she was trying to threaten me into silence. But I wasn't going to let her win. I was done being the naive husband. This was war, and I was determined to come out on top, no matter how much it hurt. The days that followed felt like a whirlwind. I stayed up late every night, poring over every piece of evidence I had collected, screenshots, bank records, messages. I knew I needed a solid legal strategy, and I also knew she was capable of anything to keep her secrets hidden. I was starting to realize just how deep her lies ran. She had managed to keep this affair and theft hidden from everyone, friends, her family, even her coworkers. The only thing left was to make sure I had enough proof to back up my claims when I finally took her to court. I set up a meeting with my lawyer, a guy named David who was sharp and no nonsense. I told him everything about the affair, the siphoned money, her threats. He listened carefully, then laid out the options. First, I could file for divorce immediately, citing adultery and financial misconduct. But he warned me that she'd probably fight hard, especially since she had a lot of money and was willing to threaten me with everything she had. He advised me to gather more concrete evidence, especially anything that could prove her intent to steal or hide assets, before making a move. While I was working with the lawyer, I also hired a forensic accountant. I wanted to trace every dollar she'd taken, see if she'd hidden any other accounts, or if there were any other financial discrepancies. The accountant uncovered some shocking things. It turned out she'd been funneling money into offshore accounts I didn't even know existed. She'd set up multiple shell companies to hide her assets. The scope of her deception was staggering. This wasn't just a fling, it was a full-blown financial scheme. I also decided to confront her one last time before moving forward with legal action. I told her I knew everything about Ryan, the money, the shell companies. I told her she could come clean or I'd expose her publicly. Her reaction was classic. She started crying, claiming she loved me, that she was under so much pressure at work, that Ryan was just a mistake, and that she'd never do anything to hurt our family. She begged me to forgive her, to let her fix things, but I saw right through her tears. I knew she was just trying to manipulate me into backing down. That night, I sat her down and told her I was done playing her game. I told her I was going to file for divorce, and I was going to ensure she didn't get away with this. I also let her know I'd be fighting for custody of the kids and for my fair share of the assets. Her bitchy attitude shifted into panic. She yelled, she cursed, she threatened me again, said she'd ruin me if I went through with it. I was calm but firm. I told her I had the proof, that I wasn't afraid of her threats and that she'd regret crossing me. I also started making arrangements to protect myself financially. I moved some funds into a separate account, just in case she tried to drain everything before the divorce finalized. I also contacted my employer, just to let them know what was happening. I wanted to be transparent, so there wouldn't be any surprises. I knew she'd escalate her tactics, maybe even try to turn the kids against me. I had to stay 2 steps ahead. The emotional toll was brutal. I felt betrayed, humiliated, and furious. But underneath it all, I also felt a strange sense of relief. This wasn't just about revenge. It was about reclaiming my life. My marriage had become a lie, and I was finally ready to face the truth and do what I had to do. I knew that whatever happened next, I had to stand my ground. I couldn't let her destroy me or my future. I was determined to fight for what was rightfully mine, my dignity, my money, my family, whatever it took. The day I filed the divorce papers was one of the hardest days I've ever faced. It felt like I was finally pulling off the mask that Lisa had been wearing for years. I sat in that lawyer's office, watching her name go on the documents, knowing full well what she'd done: cheated, lied, stole, and threatened. It was like ripping off a Band-Aid that had been festering for too long. The moment I signed my name, I felt a strange mix of relief and dread. Relief because I was taking back control, and dread because I knew this was just the beginning of a brutal battle. Lisa's reaction was exactly what I expected. She went ballistic when she found out. She screamed, threw things, and accused me of ruining her life, like she hadn't been the one doing that all along. She called me every name in the book, cursing me for destroying her family, but I just sat there, calm and steady. I knew I had the evidence, and I knew I had the law on my side. Her bitchy facade cracked a little more, and I saw her for what she really was: a manipulative, dishonest woman who'd betrayed everything we built together. In the weeks that followed, I prepared for the court battle. I had the forensic accountant's report, the bank statements, the messages, and the photos from Ryan's hotel. I also hired a private investigator to gather more evidence of her attempts to hide assets and her ongoing affair. The more I uncovered, the clearer it became that she had zero intention of going quietly. She hired her own lawyer and started fighting me with everything she had, claiming she deserved the house, the savings, the kids. But I was ready. I knew her game now, and I wasn't going to let her win without a fight. The custody battle was another nightmare. Lisa tried to turn the kids against me, saying I was bad or absent. She used her bitchy charm to manipulate them, but I stayed consistent. I hired a counselor for the kids, and I worked hard to show that I was still their father, still there for them. I knew Lisa's threats and lies wouldn't work forever. My priority was making sure they knew the truth, that I loved them and would do everything to protect them from her manipulations. The court hearings dragged on for months. Each session was a test of patience, but I stayed focused. Every piece of evidence I presented chipped away at her false image. The judge saw through her lies, and eventually the court ruled in my favor. I was awarded primary custody of the kids, and the judge ordered Lisa to pay back the stolen money and to stay away from our accounts. It was a huge win, but it didn't come without a cost. The emotional scars ran deep, and I knew trust would be hard to rebuild. Throughout all this, I learned a lot about myself. I learned that even when you think everything is stable, betrayal can come from the most unexpected places. I learned that you have to be prepared to fight for your future, no matter how painful it gets. And I learned that in the end, the truth always comes out, sometimes painfully, but always eventually. I also realized that revenge isn't just about hurting someone back. It's about reclaiming your life, your dignity, and your peace of mind. Now, looking back, I'm still healing. I'm rebuilding my life, one step at a time. I'm more cautious about who I trust, but I'm also stronger. I know I'll never forget what happened, but I refuse to let it define me. My advice to anyone in a similar situation: trust your instincts, gather your evidence, and don't be afraid to stand up for yourself. Sometimes, the only way to move forward is to face the truth head-on and fight for what's rightfully yours. After everything settled, after the court's decision, after I moved out of the house and started piecing my life back together, I realized how much I'd been through. The betrayal cut so deep, but it also opened my eyes to a lot of things I'd ignored for too long. I thought I knew Lisa, thought I understood my marriage, but it turns out I was blind to the manipulation and lies right under my nose. That's what hurts the most, knowing I was so blind that I didn't see what was happening until it was almost too late. The process of rebuilding has been brutal but necessary. I've had to learn to trust myself again, to be cautious about who I let into my life. I've become more guarded, more aware, but I also allow myself to hope again. I'm working on healing the emotional scars, piece by piece, and trying to find some sense of normalcy. My kids are doing okay, they're resilient, and I make sure they know they're loved and protected. That's what keeps me going. Looking back, I see how this whole ordeal changed me. I'm more cautious about money, more aware of the warning signs. I don't take anyone's word at face value anymore. And I've learned that sometimes you have to fight dirty just to get your life back. It's not pretty and it's not easy, but it's necessary. I don't regret standing up for myself, even if it cost me my marriage. I value my integrity and my peace of mind more than I ever valued keeping her happy. To anyone reading this who might be going through something similar, trust your instincts. When something feels off, don't dismiss it. Gather your evidence, protect yourself legally, and don't be afraid to fight for what's right. People can surprise you, sometimes in the worst ways. But remember, you're stronger than you think. You don't have to accept betrayal or lies. You deserve honesty, respect, and a chance to rebuild your life, no matter how shattered it might seem right now. I've learned that revenge isn't just about hurting someone back. It's about reclaiming your dignity and moving forward. It's about standing your ground, knowing your worth, and not letting anyone take that away from you. I'll never forget what happened, but I refuse to be defined by it. Instead, I'm taking the lessons, the scars, and the strength I've gained to forge a new path, one where I control my story. That's what true revenge is, taking back your life and making sure you never let anyone diminish you again.